All right, so if you called in and are expecting to learn about how to get feedback with enough context from your CSMs, your sales reps, all that stuff, then great, you've joined the right webinar. If not, you're in the wrong call, but hope you stick around. We'll try to make this as interesting as possible today and share some stories and all sorts of good stuff. Um, Quick housekeeping stuff before we get started. You will get a recording of this afterwards, don't worry. And please drop comments, stories, anecdotes, feedback in the chat as we are going through. I keep monitoring this throughout the webinar, and use the Q&A if you have questions, and we'll try to respond to them live if we can. All right, let's get started. So I'm Dan. I'm the head of go-to-market here at Savio. I've been in SaaS for about a dozen years. Worked at a number of different startups and technology companies. Some really, really small where we were, I was the first employee hired outside of the founders, and then all the way up to an IPO. So lots of experience on the go-to-market side of the equation. So I'll try to share some stories around like what would have been helpful for me when I was running sales teams in terms of product training and that kind of stuff. And we also have Kareem here, who's co-founder of Savio. 4 times founder, 3 times exits, has been in product management for over 20 years now at a number of different companies. So has a lot of expertise and a lot of experience to share around this stuff. So what we'll learn today is how to structure feedback. So your reps can give you the right context as they are giving you feedback. What additional data you need to capture that would be helpful for product. How to leverage AI to extract context from this feedback. The game has changed a lot in the last couple of years with AI and tools. So there's a lot more that you can do here with AI than you were able to do before. And then how to keep your feedback organized so that you can actually use it, make sense of it, all of that stuff. All right, let's get started here. So a broken telephone basically ruins your product. And what I mean by this is that often feedback loses valuable context as it gets filtered through the teams. So you have a customer that has, a problem or a piece of feedback, or hey, I wish it could do this. That gets said to a sales rep, a CSM, or support rep. They then filter that piece of feedback and filter out some context and all that stuff and put it somewhere for the product team to dissect. And then the product team has partial context, if any context at all. And then that feedback is used to prioritize feature development. And oftentimes it leads to product changes that really end up missing the mark. So with feedback, the devil is really in the details. If you miss the details or if there's no context, you can really set yourself to build the wrong things. And I know Kareem, we were chatting earlier today about an example of intercom. Can you share that story?
Yeah, for sure. So the intercom folks early in the, back in the day when they started a couple of years in, they got word from a rep that a customer wanted a map. And so they sort of heard this a couple of times before, and they were thinking, they tell the story publicly. They were thinking how like, oh, map, that'd be great. We could like have a real world map. And like every time somebody would, from intercom somebody would use intercom to chat with you. You'd see on the map, somebody would sign in from, somebody would message you from Halifax, somebody would message you from Melbourne and New York and Paris and wherever. And they had sort of these grand dreams about what this map feature would look like until one of the PMs had sort of the wherewithal to go back to, a handful of customers and say, like, what do you actually need this for? And they said, well, we want to show our exec team how, broadly distributed our customer base is, how we have customers in all these different places. And we want to use intercom for that. And so a map would be useful. And so they realized that what they actually needed was not the sort of like, always on map with like little lights, blinking in from all over the world. What they needed was like a static, very like coarse looking map with, a handful of faces and some numbers, 300 people signed in from North America and 500 from South America, et cetera, et cetera. And so without like, anybody who's a PM on here knows this, but the devil really is in the details. And if you sort of skip the discovery step or don't get the necessary context alongside the feedback, you're, very often going to set out in the wrong direction.
Yeah, so this happens a lot, right? Oftentimes like the go-to-market teams are not like they're not trained the same way as product teams. So like they don't understand how important this context can be. And really, what happens is that context is really a scaling issue. And I have plenty of examples from this, and I'm sure, Kareem, you have probably plenty of examples of this as well. When you're a small company, maybe a handful of founders, a handful of employees, might be a couple CSMs, couple sales reps, maybe one product manager, probably sub 20 employees. Context is usually not lost. You're always in communication, you feel close to the customer, and really it's because your first feedback system is really like everybody sitting around the same desks. Like I remember at one time I was at a company called Level Jump. We're four people. It was the founder, his co-founder, me, and another rep. And we were literally, I don't know if you've watched Silicon Valley, the HBO show, like literally like four desks, four monitors in an incubator space. And we were constantly in contact. We were like all in on this startup. We were there at 7 a.m., left at 7 or 8 p.m. We were talking to customers every day. And as soon as a customer call was done, we would huddle and we'd say, this is how the call went. This is what was mentioned. Oh, it'd be good if we could do this. They reacted to this piece of the demo. Like it was the same when we onboarded customers. Like that was our feedback system. We were just always around each other. So like there was almost never any context missed. But what happens is that, companies don't stay that small forever. And you have a lot more headcount. You start hiring 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 reps. You might have 5, 6, 7 CSMs. You might have 2 or 3 product managers that are responsible for their areas of product. The customer count is growing, and over time, you're just not in the loop anymore. Like the executives are not in touch with the customers as much as they used to be. The product managers are not sitting next to every single rep anymore, and you just end up missing out on a lot of the context that happens in these tight-knit conversations when you're really, really small. So as you scale, you need to be able to you need to have a system that's able to handle the increasing number of customers, prospects, and people within your company that are constantly communicating around your product. And this is really like where it becomes difficult for a lot of organizations to manage this process. So context is only an issue when you start scaling for the most part. And so what a lot of product teams tend to do is that they say, oh, well, if I can't get the context from my sales or my CSM reps, I'm just going to go put a voting board in place and get direct customer feedback. The problem is that direct customer feedback is a new behavior that you're introducing to customers. So your customers are already sharing feedback with your sales reps and your CSMs and your support people. And then all of a sudden, they're being asked to go share that same feedback twice in a different format in a different area. So why would they want to go do that somewhere else, right? When they've already given it. And the other piece is what makes customers better at giving feedback than internal teams? For the most part, they're not any better. They're still giving you like, I want a blue button, right? And still not telling you why. And I know, Kareem, you were just on conversations this morning where this literally happened to you.
Yeah, I
right?
had a couple of conversations where I got, some very non-specific feedback that was very non-specific in terms of like what it was that the customer wanted and what the problem was and what they expected. And so, I'm sure any PM or anybody who's, has product thinking, has tried to get product requirements out of a customer, has had this experience where they have to pull it, right? They have to ask specific questions about what it is the customer wants to see, what they expected to see, what they're not seeing, all that kind of information. And so, when you put up a voting board, I mean, there's nothing more, I hate nothing more online than like giving feedback to a company, because I go out of my way to do that. And then they say, great, can you go to our community portal, like find the feature request and give, put the feedback there? And I'm like, no, I just gave it to you. Why don't you could bin it, but that makes me less excited, or you can go, put it where it needs to be. But I've done my part. I've sort of gone above and beyond as a customer. But, on top of that, in addition to that, customers, people in general, it's not even customers, people in general often don't know how to give good feedback when it comes to product. And so a good PM or, a good sales rep or CS rep who has some product thinking chops can really pull that context out of a customer or prospect and make it useful for the product team.
So what's really missing that we found with a lot of teams is that the sales reps and the CSMs don't have really good structure or guardrails to help them do this. So, you're scaling up, you have more conversations happening, the teams are getting bigger, there's more feedback to handle. There needs to be a place to put that feedback, but it needs to be submitted in a way that the product team can make sense of it. And there's no real great way to do this. The voting boards are never the solution. They often fail for a number of reasons. So how do you put structure and guardrails in place to help them? So really what you need is your structure is kind of like the system. So there needs to be something that's repeatable, that's easy to do, that they're going to remember to do. It's going to be in their workflows that they can do over and over and over again. Like if you make the structure easy for them, they will do it. And then the other piece is setting some guardrails, and guardrails is really about teaching them or guiding them on how to give good product feedback. So you need them to become product thinkers, and they need a little bit of help with how to do that.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you sort of go from, with your example, you go from, a bunch of people sitting around a conference room table, it's very messy, very chaotic, but that's the system. And then as you scale, like the structure that you need to bring to the system is in the form of a process and a set of tools to capture that feedback and funnel it effectively to product. And then on the guardrails front, like it's not sales and CS job to be product thinkers, right? And so what you want is, to Dan's point, is a way to teach them and guide them to ask the right questions, to do the job of pulling the necessary context out of the person when they're giving you some product feedback.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to go through a framework today of what to capture from your sales CSM reps, just to make sure that you are capturing the right stuff and it's the right balance of, asking them what to give you versus, not overwhelming them. So to the point that they don't give you feedback. So we call this the usable feedback matrix, and Kareem's going to walk us through the different components of this.
Yeah, so there's really 4 pieces of context that you need when you're getting product feedback. So the first is, sort of information about the person who's giving you the feedback, the customer or prospect. The second is what's the problem that they're experiencing. The third is what do they expect, or what is it that they want? And the last is importance. And I know that we run into this all the time with customers, teams who want more feedback than this, but there's a trade-off. It's kind of like in marketing, right? Like marketing people, if you ever work with them, they'll have a form for prospects to fill out, and they want to add lots and lots of fields. But the more fields you have, the fewer people who actually complete the form. And so, sales folks want to close deals. CS reps want to make customers happy to increase retention. And so this logging feedback is an addition to their job that helps them in the medium to long term, but probably not in the short term. And so you really want to be able to distill the key set of things that you ask down to the core basics, so that you're not asking them to give you tons and tons of information, because when that happens, what we've seen is that folks end up not filling out the form. And so in product, you actually get less. You're asking for more and you end up getting less. So here are the 4 pieces, and we'll walk through each one.
And I just want to add something there. I was talking to a product leader a couple days ago, and he made a really, really good point. He was like, "You're never going to build a feature purely just on feedback, right?" So, and it's like I've never witnessed that in my career, and I'm sure you haven't either, Kareem. Where it's like I've just looked at these 20 pieces of feedback, and I have every single piece of information that I need to actually go build this feature correctly. Right. It's not going to happen that way. But what you want to do is make sure that you have the right type of feedback to allow you to prioritize what you should be doing your discovery on. And so this is the sweet spot balance between, like, if you ask for too much feedback, then you don't capture everything that your reps are hearing in the market. And if they're not capturing everything, then you might or might not be doing feature discovery on the right stuff. There might be other things that are more important, but because you're asking for too much context, reps are just like, why bother? Like, I have to fill this novel, I have 3 pieces of feedback from my prospects every month. This is time consuming, takes me half an hour to figure out how to answer these questions. I don't even have the answer to most of these questions. Why bother giving you feedback in the first place? And that's what you want to avoid with the amount of feedback and how you structure your feedback.
Totally. So the first one is information about the customer or the prospect or the ex-customer. So the key pieces here are: what's their revenue, how much are they worth to you today, and then potentially if it's a deal that's on the table, what could they be worth to you tomorrow. The next is the type of customer. So are they active? Are they prospect, churn customer? Are they partner? Who's giving the feedback? And then the last is, are they in your ICP or not? And so that, the characteristics of your ICP vary company to company, but understanding, like, not all feedback is created equal, not all customers are created equal. And so understanding this information really helps you weight the request appropriately. And we recommend pulling in, if you're getting a reasonable amount of feedback, getting all this information manually is really painful. So Savio pulls this information in from your CRM, and that's the approach that we recommend, so that this whole piece, other than choosing the customer or the prospect, this whole piece is just automated. So the next piece is the problem, the customer problem. So what is the thing that they want to do but that they're not able to do? What's the sort of missing functionality in the product that they need help with? And so this usually isn't a feature. Although sometimes it may be, like for very simple or very obvious, straightforward situations. But the problem, I get lots of feedback, or got lots of feedback before I started Savio, along the lines of, I need a blue button. And what the real problem there was, was that the person was colorblind and they needed to be able to, distinguish buttons. And so, as a PM, I need a blue button is not helpful. But our users are colorblind and need a way to see the buttons or distinguish the buttons. That's much more helpful feedback. So drilling in on the problem here is really the core piece. The next one obviously is what is the user expecting to do, or what are they trying to do? What should happen? And so the blue button case, blue button's not useful. The expected outcome is I expect to be able to distinguish between buttons and click the right button, submit a form, take some revenue generating action in your system. So, it's ideal to understand from the customer's perspective what it is that they're trying to do. And very often customers will lead with this. And the real product thinking comes from saying, great, I understand that you're having you're wanting to do X. Help me understand why that's important to you. I mean, that's one of the key questions. If you ever logged feedback, via our intercom chat at Savio, that's one of the key questions that we start conversations off with, to really unpack, why that's important. What's the real root problem, right? I need a map. Well, that's a solution, but why do you need the map? Okay, well, you want to show, how broad our customer base is. Great. We can design the right kind of map to give you that versus, the 20 other reasons why you might need a map. So really understanding what the outcome is, that's usually the thing that customers lead with, but you'll want to make sure that you understand sort of the edges of this, like the what and the why, instead of just blue button, really unpack that a little bit more. And the last one is importance. So, this is a nice to have, must have, deal breaker. So this is usually pretty easy for the customer to articulate. It's also helpful to understand why. So like, if they say it's a must have and you provide a workaround, understanding why the workaround is not good enough is helpful for you as well to sort of understand, like, is the customer really, do they really understand? Are they being lazy? Right? Is the workaround really good, or is it a really crappy workaround and they do this all the time? So they don't want to take the 5 extra steps. They'd rather just take the 1 step that would come with you building the feature. So this is a super helpful piece of information. So understanding those 4 pieces will really give you the necessary context to prioritize effectively.
And if you're using Savio, this stuff already exists pretty much in the Chrome extension, the Slack integrations and stuff. You can add a template for like the 2 questions, like what's the problem, what's the desired outcome, that helps. But if you're not using Savio, like these are the things that I would teach your sales rep when you have your like spreadsheet or backlog or sale or Slack channel or whatever that you use. Like I would have your sales reps or CSMs fill out those buckets so that when you're collecting it, trying to organize it, you have all the right information that's going to be useful for gathering context.
So, a handful of key principles that we built Savio around that we've seen to be true in the market or really important in the market, from the product team's perspective in order to get good feedback and context with that feedback. So the first is making collection as easy as possible. And so what does that actually mean? Well, as I mentioned earlier, sales and CS have their own jobs, right? Sales has to make quota. CS does too, very often. And so if they get some feedback on a call and they then need to leave their CRM, open up different tabs, find the right row, paste something in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You guys are bored of hearing me speak, right? Just imagine your sales rep, you have to do this 5 times a day. You're not going to want to do it. So if they have to leave their tooling, you're not going to get a lot of feedback. If they have to go to a voting board, same thing. They got to leave their app, go to the right voting board, find the feature, vote on behalf of the customer. You're not going to get as much feedback. If they have to use a tool like that they're not used to, right? So like a lot of teams will start with the tools that they have at hand, like a spreadsheet, or heaven forbid, a tool like Jira. You're now asking sales reps to go into Jira, which is a dev tool. It's not a sales tool. Or a ticketing system, which they don't really use. They then need to go figure out how to do that properly and submit feedback. And again, same thing, you're not going to get a lot of it. So the goal here is really to make it collection as easy as possible. And what does that mean? It means primarily they don't have to leave their app that they use on a regular basis. And they have the questions that they need to answer right at hand. And so, with Savio, the approach we took was to build a Chrome extension that just opens up on top of any app that you're using. So second piece is train your sales and CS reps on what we call a basic feedback framework. And so really you want to train your reps on how to capture good feedback. So Dan mentioned earlier that in Savio, we have a template, but you don't need to use Savio. You can use a form or Google Sheets or whatever. Just make sure that they have a set of questions that they need to answer so that you can capture the feedback that we outlined in the feedback matrix. It ideally should be right in front of your GTM reps, so they don't need to think. They just crack it open, answer the questions, close it, and they're done. Because remember, they're not product thinkers. I'm sort of curious, Dan, like you've been in a sales capacity at many companies. What's your experience been like when like in sort of being trained up on product thinking? That's one of the gaps we hear about in the marketplace when we talk to PMs. What's your experience?
Yeah, I've been in SaaS for over a dozen years now, and I've gotten 0 product training. I've never had anybody in product tell me what good feedback looks like. I've submitted plenty of feedback, and I'll give you an example. I was at a company, I was heading up the sales team there, and we were collecting in our CRM, we had build fields around product feedback or feature requests. So as my sales reps were running deals and if we had identified any gaps against competitors or whatever, we would log it. And then I had this massive report that looked at every single company that we had logged feedback against, every single opportunity. and then the value. And so I pulled this dead loss opportunity report, and we had a key integration that was missing for the market that we were trying to get into. So we were changing our ICP, we were going up market. There was a key integration, 3 years of tracking it, over $4 million of lost opportunities against it. And I would have the same conversations with the product team around like, we need this integration. And it was like, well, we don't have enough context onto why. And it's like, okay, but tell me what I need to go get for you. Like, what context do you need? Teach me what do I need in order to be able to say, like, this $4 million gap that we've had for a number of years because we are not having this key integration. What do I need to go get from prospects? Like, how do I need to structure this feedback so you start paying attention to it? And I just never got the training. And I've been at multiple SaaS companies now, and the product team has never, at least in the organizations that I worked with, we had plenty of product meetings, but the product team had never told me like, this is what good feedback looks like for us. Like, we need this for this reason. Wasn't until you and I started working together that I really understood, like, oh, okay, like now I get it. Like, if I don't have this, then, you know, you have to prioritize whether or not we have a blue button or a purple button. You don't know which one, but if I don't give you context, you can't prioritize either, right?
That's right.
So it's very eye-opening, and a lot of times, like, it's as simple as that for a lot of product teams. If you're not getting good product feedback from your go-to-market reps, how much time have you spent training them on giving good feedback or recognizing what feedback like sounds like it in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great point. Like that, it's really on the product side, it's a help you help me kind of situation, right? Like
Mhm.
your GTM teams are excited, or let's say willing to provide feedback when they get it. They need to know what good feedback looks like, what feedback looks like, where they need to peel back the onion a little bit. And then, they need to sort of get those 4 pieces of information in order to fire over to you. But if they don't even know those things, like it's actually not really fair to even expect that they will
Yeah.
do a good job because they haven't really been told.
The I hear this all the time around, like, we don't want to become a feature factory for sales, right? And it kind of comes back to this, like, if all they're sending you are features, then what are you doing to teach them to send you something else,
Yeah, to send you what you need. That's
right?
actually going to help you. Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
a good point. There's a sort of personal responsibility piece to this as well, right? Um, so feedback is helpful, but really what you want to be able to do is to uh, bucket it into areas of your product. You want to tie it to features. So like in Savio, the sort of hierarchy we think about is you get feedback that comes in from customers. Those get tied to a feature. So a feature has many pieces of feedback. And then features fall into product areas, which is a higher level bucket. And then product areas fall into products. So product is sort of the top level item. And it cascades down from there. But the sort of main reason to do this is to understand what areas of your product need help. Excuse me, need help. What areas are your customers keen on having you fix up? And so, one thing we hear from product managers all the time are, I want themes. I want to sort of know what the hot parts of my product are with respect to themes. Like, what do we need integrations? Do we need reporting? Do we need better auth choices? And so in Savio, we just launched a handful of reports that let you see by product area, which product areas are receiving the most feedback over the last month, quarter, 6 months, et cetera. So you can sort of get a feel for, what areas of your product are lacking when it comes to customers. And then, as you sort of slice and dice those things, you could say, okay, what do prospects want? And I'll tell you, one thing that prospects wanted sort of 6 to 9 months ago in Savio was AI related features, right? Because, early adopter PMs are using GPT in their daily work, and they look at, all the tools they use and they say, well, AI could make this a lot better. And so that was, I mean, we were hot on that as well, but to hear it from customers and prospects who are evaluating products, which feedback management tool to use, really was helpful for us to understand that, more investment in AI now it de-risked that investment for us. So when you have your product, sort of all of your feedback organized into products and product areas, it gives you a better sense of, where your product could, which parts of the product use a little of. So the last piece is, on the AI front, this is something that Savio does, but, when you've got a whole bunch of feedback, you're able to use AI to extract context sometimes. So like, imagine you've got 200 pieces of feedback, 20 of them have the right context. But if you use AI to summarize that feedback, so you can get, what are the key problems here that customers are giving you? What are the, expected outcomes? What's the priority? What's the importance on this? The LLM can give you a sense of, what the context is. It's effectively extrapolating for the context that you don't have from the 180 pieces of feedback from the context that you do have from the 20. And really, like to Dan's point, nobody gets a bunch of feedback and then starts building. Like they get a bunch of feedback and then we'll go out and talk to customers. And so when you can use AI to summarize, it can give you enough guidance, enough direction, basically bootstrap like a spec for you, or a set of discovery questions that you might ask, or areas of the product where you need to do more discovery. So you can then go out and start getting that information from customers.
Yeah, this again, like this is a different world now, right? Like a couple of years ago, if you got 200 pieces of feedback from your go-to-market team on one feature, and the vast majority of it has no context, then it just feels like a stream of anecdotes and solutioning, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to ignore this because like it's not helpful. But now it's like, as long as a fraction of them has at least a little bit of context, all of a sudden that 200 becomes helpful because, okay, the demand's there, customers are asking for it. And let me quickly go through and find the context in this sea of anecdotes. And then all of a sudden you have that nugget that you can go in and say like, okay, now I can go do discovery on this because it's an actual problem. That's not something that you could do a few years ago, at least not do easily. You would have to spend a lot of time going through, what you would call unusable feedback just to find the few pieces that give you that nugget, right?
Yeah, very true. So if you're looking for a tool that does the things that we've outlined today, good system, a good process, lets your GTM reps stay in their tools, provides the analysis tooling for you as well to understand what your customers are asking for with the right context. Savio, we'd love to give you a demo of Savio. So Savio will help you understand the value of your feature requests. It layers in context from your CRM so that you can understand, which of your which feedback, who is providing which feedback. Are they folks from your ICP or not? How valuable is the feedback? It also gives you a stream of structured feedback. So this is the guardrails concept. We have a Chrome extension for your GTM teams to use. So they don't have to leave their tools, and it asks all the important questions for you to get those 4 critical pieces of context alongside your feedback. And then it also helps you use your CRM data to filter your feature requests. Next slide, Dan. It also helps you use your CRM data to filter down your feature requests, to slice and dice your list. So in addition to seeing your list of features, from most revenue to least, or most expansion revenue to least, you can also slice and dice that and say, show me just my features from churn customers or from my ICP, et cetera. And then we don't have a fancy slide yet, but we also do the AI extraction. So you can look at a feature request with 200 pieces of feedback and get an AI summary of all of that data above the feedback. So it can give you a sense of what that's like. So if you want to book a demo, just go to savio.io. There's a big book a demo button there. And you can pop it open and pick a time, and we'll chat more about how to help you guys. So we hit the Q&A portion of the webinar. So if you want to drop a question into the Q&A section there, we've got about 20 minutes or so to do some Q&A.
Yeah. So I have the Q&A open. I have the chat open. So anybody who wants to drop anything, we will answer it. I will get started with this though, Kareem. I'm a sales rep at Savio. What are your pet peeves with how I send you product feedback? What can I do better?
It's interesting. I feel like we have conversations, like we'll talk about a prospect
Mhm.
conversation, and a feature might come up, and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, can you remember to log that?" And you always do, which is great. But I feel like you're very
Always is a generous word here, by the way.
when I ask you do, but the I feel like the uh you're focused on closing deals, right? And this is typical.
Yeah.
This is expected. This is your job, right? The primary focus of your job. So the feedback piece is secondary or tertiary. And so yeah, that would be the one thing. But I also don't expect you to log everything all the time, right? You're in sales, not product.
Yeah. No, makes sense. What would you recommend for a voice of customer expert wanting to give better details to the product team, but there's not a visible desire from the product team wanting the data? Oy.
Find a new company to work for. I
That's the easy answer, I guess.
Yeah, I hate to say that, but I mean, look, product is ultimately the consumer of this information, and um, if they're not interested, you kind of have to ask why. Do they not care about this stuff in general? Is what you're sharing with them not a priority? Like I have run into that before
Mhm.
on the product side, where you know Vok would go off and do all this awesome research and bring it to me or to the team, and I say, well, this is great, but like this is going to be a priority maybe in 6 months or a year, but we have some other priorities in the sort of next 3 month time horizon. So I'd say maybe alignment, go make friends in product and sit down with them and ask them like, hey, what's coming up on your roadmap? How can I be helpful to you? One thing I will also say on the Vok front is like product, my experience, product has very much like a, how do I say this? They need to experience it viscerally firsthand in order to feel the pain. So here's an example. So I have a friend who worked for a big Swiss bank, and he was giving a presentation on to like 100 executives on how to improve their customer experience and why that would be beneficial to the bottom line. He's like, I was getting nothing. I mean, it's getting absolutely nothing. So I picked up my phone, put it on speakerphone, and called our own support line, and tried to perform some banking operation. And it was a pretty abysmal experience. And he said, like, head snapped up when I, when I picked up the phone. And so one of the bankers puts up his hand and he says, "Hey, call our competitor, and let's see how easy it is to do this." And so he called the competitor. It was easier for the competitor, and with a competitor. And so that was how he got his mandate to invest in improving the customer experience in order to improve revenue. He did some crazy stuff. So he had a mandate to improve bank branches. And so one of the things he did was, in order to get that mandate, he created what he called an old person suit, where he put executives in his executive immersion program into what he called kind of like a diving suit with like foggy glasses, and it weighed 20 pounds. And he had them walk through the bank branch from the door to the teller. And they found that like the font size and the signage was too small. He couldn't see the fonts because he had this sort of, emulating like bad vision. The suit was really bulky, and like he would bump into like the sort of ropes that delineated, where the line, where the ends of the line were, because they were too narrow. So, really getting immersing your team in the research that you're gathering can be very, very helpful in terms of getting their buy-in. And so the way to do that, on the Vox side of things, is invite the product managers to the conversations, so they can see them, they can hear them, they can see the puzzled faces, or hear the frustration in the customer's voice. So those would be really the two things: understand what their priorities are, try and align your work with their priorities, and then try and get them on board so they can viscerally hear the customers. The substitute for that would be to like slice and dice your videos, record your calls, pull out make a highlight reel of like frustrating parts, and then show those to the product team. And then option 3 is find a new company.
Yeah. A couple other things I would add here would be make sure you don't cherry pick your insights. And what I mean by this, like I used to work with a VP of CS. that had a lot of control around like the product team, around what we were going to build and all that stuff. And he did a very good job at making things sound like the world's on fire, like our business is going to fail if we don't do this thing. And so we ended up going through and like prioritizing a bunch of stuff because of this. And then when we actually looked at the data, we realized they were one-offs. And the insights were really like they were cherry picked for like, a couple accounts that we're about to churn right now. And it ended up creating a pretty bad culture between all the different teams that have an input in product. And eventually the product team kind of like decided not to work with that customer success team as much anymore, because they were basically always shitting on the product team, right? Um, so it became something to like just be conscious of like if you're a voice of customer expert, like are you cherry picking the insights, or are you giving like raw input or raw data? So try to remove the emotions from it. There are thousands of problems that the product management team could go and solve, and ideally they solve some of the things that you care about. um but just be careful with how you cherry pick those insights, because you might end up losing credibility with the product team if you are cherry picking too much. And that's what happened to one of the VP of CS that I was working with, like had a very strong voice up until we realized like, oh, the insights were very, very cherry picked. And then all of a sudden completely lost his voice.
Yeah, losing credibility, I think, by skewing the evidence is to
Yeah.
meet your preferences is one way to really lose your product team's faith.
Yeah.
Um,
And Kareem, you and I talk about this all the time. There's what is it, data led versus data justified,
yeah,
right? So like, are you finding cherry picking the examples from your customers that support the thing that you want as voice of customer? Or are you giving everything and saying like, this is everything that we could possibly do. These are the things that seem most important. So one's data led and one's data justified, and like the data justified one like it's probably the thing that kills credibility the most between the different teams.
definitely. So I have a question here from Andy. We record most customer calls, which is great, but it results in a deluge of recordings, more than I could ever listen to as one of three PMs at the company. Can you suggest a workflow for filtering the right insights from the call recording tool, i.e. Gong, Fireflies, etc., into a feedback tracker? For what it's worth, I've already set up alerts based on keywords, but I want to solve for not knowing what I don't know. That's a great question, Andy. And so um, right now we're working on like literally as we speak here, working on connecting Savio to tools like call recording tools and having AI slurp through your transcripts and pull in snippets of product feedback automatically. So that's I mean, for what it's worth, that's the dream with a feedback tracker. Is your sales and CS teams don't really have to do anything. You just connect Gong, you connect the places where you get product feedback, and your feedback tracker pulls them in, categorizes them, all that good stuff. Until we're there, the approach I would take is, so there's a handful of approaches you could take. So one is with the alerts, you can set up alerts to Zapier, and then Zapier can pipe that feedback or those snippets into your feedback tracker. We have a Zapier integration at Savio. Some folks do that as well. Your sales team, if they're willing and able to do it, can go through your Gong transcripts and log product feedback as well after their calls. I mean, I read transcripts rarely because an hour long or even half an hour long, demo can really be quite lengthy.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing you could do with your sales reps is go to them and say, look, like for every call, just log 3 pieces of feedback at most, right? Log the big things, log the deal breakers, and that would be a starting point. But honestly, I would recommend looking at Zapier and looking at a way to, for words or phrases or concepts that Gong flags, piping those pieces to your feedback tracker, and start there. See how far that gets you. I suspect that will get you quite far down the road, and certainly put you in a better place than it sounds like you are today, which is drowning in customer transcripts.
Couple other things here, especially for using Gong, because Gong is really powerful with this stuff with the keyword trackers. I would not listen to every call. I would filter based on your ICP. So Gong is typically integrated into your CRM. I don't know if Fireflies integrates in CRM. It just depends on what you're using, Andy. But with Gong, I would look at like stuff that progressed to like later stages of a deal, existing customers that are ICP, or deals that are ICP or like are, worth a certain amount, certain territory, certain region, certain industry. You can filter by these things so that you're not listening to every single call. You're only listening to the calls with like the prospects and customers that really matter. One thing that you can do too is like train the go-to-market team to like say like, oh, I'll log that as a feature request. And it's just a very easy way for Gong to pick that up, or like Fireflies to pick that up. It's like a slight change in behavior from your go-to-market team, but if they're willing to like participate there, if they hear something, you can go in and say like, oh, I'll log that as a feature request, or oh, I'll send that to the product team. And you can set those trackers up so that, the sales reps are kind of like at least helping you out a little bit, saying like, oh, at this point of the call is kind of when we talked about a feature or a product suggestion. So that's something else that you can do, Andy, if you're able to spend a bit of time with the sales team and just be like, hey, it would be super helpful for us to just go in, I'll log that.
Awesome. Glad it was helpful, Andy.
Cool. Anything else? Couple extra minutes here. We can probably do one more question. Give 10 seconds because it takes a while to type. All right. So we will leave it at that for today. If you have further questions, feel free to email either of us. Just reply to the invite and we'll respond. You will get the recording of this, and we typically do these every few weeks. The next one will be mid-December. So hopefully we can see you again next time.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everyone.